this morning. What we do this morning. Motivation. We created. And then what do we do? Inspiration. And now it's time for activation. No, not yet. It is time to talk about conquering your fears. Identifying those things.
I was afraid she was going to say that.
How many of you have ever been paralyzed by fear?
Oh my God.
Now, I don't mean the kind of fear that comes from being startled by something. I mean the kind of fear that hangs on to you like a static flame for years.
Yeah.
I can really years. Oh, me. That's why I'm up here. I'm a poster child. When I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I had dreams and visions of doing great things. I was career driven, I was money driven. I almost didn't marry James because I didn't think he had a plan. My goal, my vision was to be the vice president of somebody's company. I didn't care whose. Vice president of somebody's company, and I told everybody who would listen. Now, although over the last 20 plus years, my career has been good. It's been very good. And certainly has been lucrative to our family and our style of living. But something shifted in me. Over that time, something has shifted. In 2007, I started the business I have wanted since college, the Empowered Speaker, which is a communication skills training company that coaches people to become confident and dynamic public speakers. I thought about this business for 13 years. That's good, but what took me so long? Yeah. What took me so long? I and fear took me so long. I had in my mind that I needed to have some big fancy title for people to feel like I knew what I was talking about. But my bigger fear was that my company would fire me if they found out I had a business on the side. Because your mind gets a little shifty, right? You think you're the only one. You're the first one to do this. So I started the Empowered Speaker in secret. Now in 2010, I published my book, Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams. Yeah, that's a yay. And this book was written from a place of faith. It challenges you to step out in faith and do the thing that God has put you on this earth to do. I'm often asked two questions when people find out that I've written this book. First question is, when in the world did you find time to write a book? Those people who know me say, when did you find time to write a book? The second question was why? The answer to the first question is very simple. You find time. You make time for the things that are important. The answer to the second question is I wanted to help people and inspire people to address the thing that plagued me most. Fear. My two biggest fears, because I'm so talented, my two biggest fears were fear of failure and fear of success. Wow. Now those are what? Polar opposites. Does not even make sense. But fear doesn't always make sense. So, when I wrote the book in 2010, while I was very excited that people were inspired and they loved the book, I realized I really wrote the book for me. I have some very expensive lessons. Writing a book is not cheap. Okay. I realized I wrote the book for me because that did a couple of things. Number one, it helped me to address my own personal fears. But it also forced me to acknowledge publicly that I had this business. It's on the first few pages of the book. So it's all public knowledge now. Now here's the thing. For the 4 years prior to writing that book, I had been actively trying to get promoted at Procter & Gamble. And for those of you who are familiar with Procter & Gamble, to get promoted, you have to be on a promotable list. There is not a have to be on the list. So the first year, I was on the list. Cool. Be of somebody's company, right? Second year, off the list. Third year, did something great, have no idea what, back on the list again. Fourth year, no longer on the list. It was a roller coaster ride in its most literal sense. Now the reality is, it's a ride I chose to get on. Yeah. But now I was at the mercy of the ride. The roller coaster operators could decide how fast or how slow the ride went. They could decide how long the ride lasted. The only thing that was consistent about that ride is that I was on it. That was the only consistent thing. So around November 2010, ironically the same time as the book was published, my manager came to me at that time and said, Christy, I'm giving your biggest project to somebody else on the team. Now remember, what was my goal? Vice president of somebody's company. So, and this was my signature project to get me back on that promotable list. So needless to say, I was crushed. And I went home that weekend, I cried. James can tell you, I cried. I said in church, I cried some more because I could not believe how unfair this was. I work hard, I'm good at what I do. What do you mean I'm not? What? But then I got a revelation while I was sitting in church. And I said, what exactly am I fighting for? I don't even want this anymore. I had spent so long saying that. I want to be the vice president. That's just, it comes out of my mouth. I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. Somebody asked, oh, vice president of somebody's company. But the writing of that book was the turning point for me. So yeah, I love it that you guys like the book, and for those of you who haven't read it yet, I hope you'll enjoy it. But it was an expensive lesson for me to help me overcome my own fear. These are the choices you have to make. Because overcoming fear is a choice. You have to choose to say, I'm going to do something different to get a different outcome. Right? It's a choice you have to make. So how do you know you have fear? Other than to say, oh, I have fear. How do you really know? Turn to page 14 in your program. I'm going to read off these comments. If I read one that resonates with you, just put a check mark in the book. First one. You procrastinate the things that will make the most difference. Oh, we got sound effects. That resonates with someone. Second one, you resist ideas and suggestions. So when people say, hey, you might want to think about, what if you did? You avoid the people and situations that hold you accountable. A lot of hands. You blame circumstances, lack of knowledge, other people, etc. for your lack of progress. You get angry, especially if someone asks about one of your tasks or your goals. You are numb emotionally. You lack motivation and feel lazy about completing personal and professional chores. Just kind of put it off. You focus on low priority tasks rather than what will actually bring you results. That's like for those of us who leverage social media, it's spending all your time writing up your Twitter posts and your Facebook posts and not actually going out trying to secure speaking engagements, for example. Because that's easy. They have business. And Amy's business does that for people. So, why do you spend your time doing that? I'm just saying. That was a free plug. Last one. You are easily distracted. And it takes great effort to return to your task. All right. This is where the honesty comes to play today. How many of you checked one? At least one. I mean, at least one. At least one. That was too many moments. How many of you checked at least two? Keep your hand up. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to stop just to check.
We should get a prize for
Okay, so now you openly acknowledge that you have fear of some kind. What this would say is, if you check more than 4 of these behaviors, then you're struggling or stuck, either in your personal or professional life, or both. Or both. Because one has a direct correlation to the other. You really can't be great in one and be great at something. Doesn't work. Okay, so we've openly acknowledged we have some type of fear. The next step is to identify those fears. At the bottom of that same page, so what we did at the top is we said, okay, here are the symptoms of my fear, which are these questions we did, or these comments that we just went through. Now we're going to talk about your actual fears. Here's how I want you to think about that, because that's a big open request to say write down your fears. In the 4 domains that we talked about earlier, what were they? Family, health, career, and finances. Within those, here's how I would think about it. Anytime you evaluate something, you think about it in pros and cons, right? You weigh your options. Think about your fears from the cons perspective. So, I'll use myself as an example. One of my visions on my vision board was to speak to millions. If I played that out, and I said, okay, if that is really my dream, to speak to millions. If I were successful at that, I achieved that, that might mean that I wouldn't be home to go to all of Michaela's softball games. That might mean I would miss most of Colin's football games. That might mean I would be out of town on Thursday nights and I couldn't go to choir rehearsal, which I love to do. That might mean I'm out of town on Monday nights and I can't go to Toastmasters, which I also enjoy. That might mean I'm also not spending as much time with James as I like. Not in that order, because I love him.
Yes.
Oh. That's how I love it. Well, it's not, I guess it's everybody's joke, right? I do love that man. I guess I haven't said it once or twice. But anyway, so if you think about it that way, and then you find that what the common theme is. So based on what I just described, what is the theme that I just described as it relates to that specific vision?
Things you would not be able to do.
Sacrifice.
Family, quality of life. Quality of life. So as I write everything down, everything I'm fearful about as it relates to that, you got to look for the common themes so that that fear rises to the top. So in that case, my fear would be quality of life changes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So take a few minutes. We'll gauge it. I know what I thought in my mind was y'all going to take a little longer on some stuff today. Which is good. Which is good. You know, which is good. So take a couple minutes and start to jot down just in that left column. Don't go any further than the left column. Again, think about those 4 domains. So what would your anxiety be in the area to it at some point? Well, we have to identify the root causes, because otherwise you never really know why it is that you're doing or not doing what you're doing. That's a mouthful. The history of your fear. What's the history of your particular fear? Does it stem from something in childhood? I'll give you a great example. I met another Christy who's like, well, I told you I'm childhood. I got lots of fears. When I decided to do this conference 4 months ago, Tricia and I were on the phone, I had a revelation after I made the decision to do this. One day I was literally driving down the road. This is after I made the decision to do it. I'm driving down the road, and the memory of my high school graduation party came to my mind. My brother-in-law's sister and I were the same age, and we were both graduating, 2 different schools. And we decided it would be a great idea to both, have our party together. Let's just consolidate, invite all of our friends. Well, none of my friends came to the party. None of them showed up. Now, when you ask me why it took me 2 years to do something like this, that's the memory that was in the back of my head that I had forgotten about. I had honestly forgotten about it. Because I'm like, what in the world? It's not that hard. Well, it is hard, to be clear. Like, it's not that hard to just say we're going to do something. Let's just plan this thing and get it done. But it's hard when in the back of your mind, your biggest fear is that nobody will come. Nobody will come. That still bothers me. So I guess they were not really my friends. They would have come to the party. After all these years of another revelation, they weren't my friends. But what did you? It could have been. It could have been just a bad connection. But it's all about understanding where that history of that fear comes from. So that's the first one. What triggers that fear? What is it that happens that all of a sudden makes that rise to the surface? Now we can we can just use a silly example and say, I'm afraid of snakes. Who's afraid of snakes? James has all of the feet. Afraid of snakes. So just the thought of a snake, immediately, all the reactions I would have as if I were seeing one are all the same. What triggers it? The name, the thought, the sound. Somebody said, oh, there's a snake on TV. The book, everything. Okay? So understanding what triggers it so that you can start to make choices about avoiding those circumstances that may trigger it, right? How does the fear affect you? What does it cause you to do or not do? And my example was a prime one. Being afraid that nobody will come is a great reason to not have a party. I mean, why subject yourself? When things happen that dispel those fears, you know how much easier it will be for me to do this again?
Yes.
That fear now is gone. Bigger location for you to find.
That's right.
And he's on board. I'm telling you, it's our partner. So, knowing how that fear affects you is critical to, again, the whole package. The whole package. So the next thing for you to do, for those top 2 fears, because I said earlier when I coach people on public speaking, I say focus on the 2 things that will make the most impact most immediately. So your number 1 and your number 2 is where I want you to spend a couple of minutes just thinking about, jotting down, what's the history of that fear? Are there any key drivers that come to your mind that says, okay, yeah, this is why I have this issue? And it could be that my mom always told me, or my sister always, whatever that trigger, that history is. Understanding what that is. What triggers it, and how does that affect you, or how has it affected you up to this point? Just for those top, you ranked your top, you rank them. Written down some notes about memories, things, how the fears, that those top 2 fears affect you. Now what can you do to actually overcome those fears? This is the next step. First one, imagine the outcome you desire. So you already know that the big goal is to overcome this fear of Throw one out for me early.
Rejection.
Rejection.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big one. Ooh, okay. Imagine the outcome you want to desire to overcome your fear of rejection. Now the key there is to break that big goal into smaller pieces. Smaller, concrete goals to hit the overall objective, which is overcome the fear of rejection. Let's play that one out. Let's use that one as an example. So if her big fear is rejection, toss out some things she might do in small phases, small pieces, to overcome that fear. So talk to strangers.
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Yes.
I would say focus on those who have not rejected her and kind of keep those in mind as people look at
As examples of positive things, right? Okay. Did you?
I was going to say build self-confidence, which requires stepping out of your comfort zone.
Because to overcome fear, you got to do something different, right? Which sometimes means stepping out of that comfort zone. Yes.
Turn rejection into a positive. The more rejections, the closer you are to a positive.
That's good.
And some things it's like, don't take it personal. And that's easier said than done, right? Because we do take it personal. I take it personal to the people that come to my party. I'm going to release. I don't know what I'll be praying for the party. Release, yes. Coaching somebody else. Anytime we take the focus off of ourselves, it always works better. One of my friends tells me, and she I guess it's a trick. Yeah, it's a trick because it works. She'll always say, Christy, I have a friend who is having blah, 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 blah issue. What would you say? And I go, oh, solved. And then she says, so Christy, what you gonna do about blah, blah? Oh, Lord, I just don't know. And she said, why is it that you can solve everybody else's issues, but you can't address your own?
Right.
And I said, you're no longer my friend. So great, those are small, those are examples of like small things you can do to get to the bigger goal. The second one, try gradual desensitization. Gradual desensitization, what does that mean? Well, I will tell you. I'm so glad you asked. Oftentimes, we're afraid. Were you going to answer the question?
I was going to offer something.
Offer up.
It's constantly expose yourself to it and tell yourself, kind of evaluate afterwards, like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And slowly you walk away and just perspective changes.
Because often, excellent. And okay, we'll give you more class later. Oftentimes we are afraid of things because we have not been exposed to them. Very often. It's the fear of the unknown. I don't like change because I don't know what change means. I don't want success because I don't know what success looks like. I don't want to fail because I don't know what failure looks like. So in order to do that, you have to expose yourself in small doses. If you're a person who does not like change, drive a different way home from work. It's a small thing, but it's the small things that ultimately build to the bigger thing, which then ultimately gives you confidence. That's what it's about. It's about taking those small steps that ultimately will build your confidence. Okay? A third step, a third potential step. Consider direct confrontation. Meet it head on.
That's right.
Sometimes that is the best approach.
Yes, it is.
And what you often find, see how many people in here are like me or like truly strange. In anticipation of events like this, or things that are very important to me, I dream really weird stuff. Like I dreamed last night when I wasn't sleeping. Not sure how that happened. I dreamed last night there was a huge accident on the highway that kept me from getting across the bridge because we live in Kentucky, and I missed my own conference. That was just one of them. I also dreamed that you all had shown up and I was not prepared. I had no binders, I had no material, and I kept waiting, going, where's the stuff? And I'm like, oh Lord, they're here and I didn't do anything. So, yeah, it's an issue. I realize it. One more thing I did have to overcome. But oftentimes when those things happen and you dream like that, I actually enjoy, when I have dreams like that, I know things are going to turn out well. Those are my cues. You know, when wedding, you dream all the worst things are going to happen. I'm going to spill something on my dress. And then the wedding is beautiful. So when I don't dream, I know you're going to have a this is going to be a problem. All right. So direct confrontation is also an option. Don't let the momentum subside. Don't let the momentum subside. It takes a certain amount of momentum to overcome fear. Working on this conference for 4 months. Within that 4 months, lots of things happen. Not all good. Julia could probably tell you about every one of them. Because I called her and went, and then this, and then this, and then this. You still think I'm a good person? Okay, and then this. So, and here's the thing, you cannot don't confuse fear with faith. Because if you are a person who is afraid of failure, you might let yourself think that it's fate for you not to start that catering business, for example. Okay? The key is you have control over your path. You have control over your thoughts towards achieving the goal and towards overcoming those fears. And I always tell people, almost any group I've ever spoken to, I always say, surround yourself. That's what Bishop said earlier. Surround yourself with people who support your vision. Surround yourself with people who know you are trying your best to overcome this. I'm trying my best to do what I know I've been called to do, and I am running into a ton of obstacles. You need that encouragement. Everybody needs encouragement. You can't always be the encourager. Sometimes you need encouragement. And you need to surround yourself with people who will help you to do that. Don't judge, but just, hey, you know what? I just had a really, really bad day. And it's just like I was talking to Alicia. And I was telling her about the email that I mentioned earlier from the lady who is an encourager. And in her mind, T-3 days and counting was encouraging. Because I know you've been looking forward to this. We've been praying about this for 4 months. So you got to be ready. I am not ready. Okay? That's really fast. This has been the fastest week of my life. Because that's when all the things still have to be done, right? When you get closer to the dream, woo! That's a sermon.
Yes, it is.
I don't preach because it's a sermon. Celebrate your victories. Celebrate your victories. Every little thing is a big thing. It's a big thing. So don't get caught up in, but I wanted to have this many people. The people who are in the place are the people who are in the place.
That's right.
So celebrate. Don't ever miss that part. Even if it seems small to anybody else. It doesn't matter. In our house, we celebrate every little thing. If I don't pass out at 4:20, I'm sure we'll go out. Any opportunity. Because that's just what we do. We celebrate. You know, when Colin wins something or Michaela does something, gets some great award, we eat. But not eating is not the point. The point is celebrate. Because that's important. And we want them to know, we want each other to know it's important. And it keeps driving you, right? You celebrate one thing, you're like, hey.